welcome to our speakers. I'll introduce myself first. My name's John Orrett. I've been a member of the NDP for 35 years. I'm presently president of the Federal Thornhill Riding Association. I'm on the executive of the Provincial Riding Association, and I'm the provincial councillor for our riding association. But more importantly, I'm one of the initiators and builders of Credondp, the campaign to restore democracy in the NDP. This public forum is to launch the campaign to restore democracy. And the campaign here is precipitated by several events. The purpose of this afternoon's meeting is to listen to 3 speakers who were personally involved in actions taken by the party that call into question the present state of democracy in our party. Another objective is to plan a response, to develop a strategy that will make the party and its leadership make an about-face and become more accountable to the party membership and to build more democracy. After we hear from our speakers, I myself will have the opportunity to speak briefly about another incident that occurred. So in reality, we're going to have 3.5 speakers. I'll be the 3.5. I'll be the half speaker at the end. After these presentations, there'll be a question and answer period, and later on after the speeches, I'll lay out the format of this, the public participation part of the meeting. But before introducing our speakers, there's one other thing that we need to do, and that is every organization requires activists and requires information about those activists. So if anybody's willing to do anything and help and be involved and want to be informed by email or anything else, we're going to hand around a clipboard. Let me get John.
Close the door while you're at it. We're getting too much ambient noise.
You shall close the door. But what if people are looking for our meeting? Okay, so John Wilson, if we have a clipboard, the clipboard is being handed around. I just wanted to make sure of that. Please write clearly. There's no use having an email address that we can't type into our program. So write it clearly. So I will now introduce our 3 speakers in the order that they're making their 10-minute presentations, and part of my job as an unexperienced chair is to make sure they don't go beyond that, and I'll try to give them a 1-minute warning. Our first speaker will be Tristan Ridley. He's a young activist in the NDP. He lives in Eglinton, Lawrence Riding. He was briefly the organizer for the NDP in Calgary, and he was elected the outreach coordinator at the 2010 ONDP convention. He'll have something to say about that convention and events that transpired after it. Deanna Andrews is an elementary school teacher, an activist. She was a NDP candidate in the federal election in May 2011. And she was one of the NDP federal candidates in, she was the candidate in May, but she was also nominated in Etobicoke North and had that, or no, she was not allowed to run. She'll have a story about what happened exactly in Etobicoke North. Barry Weisletter is also a teacher, an activist, and a journalist. He was nominated the NDP candidate in Thornhill until NDP officials rescinded the nomination on September 3rd. He is chairperson of the NDP Socialist Caucus. So, without further ado, I will ask our first speaker, Tristan Ridley, to come up and speak to us.
Unfortunately, this one's a little bit more complicated than the straightforward removal of candidates, but there's a short version. They didn't like who the ONDP convention elected, and so they booted them out and replaced them with their own people. It really started when the very first regional club of the Ontario New Democratic Youth, the Toronto Young New Democrats, TYND, It was very successful. I think they signed up 50 new members in about 8 months. I don't remember the last time that's happened. They had a disagreement with the ONDP executive. ONDP executive considered them too socialist, maybe even Marxist. What a crazy thought. And so they de-chartered TYND with no explanation. The TYND reached out to activists, to NDP members, and formed a slate called the Slate for a Democratic and Activist ONDP. We had the most diverse representative selection. We even had moderates. We had rural, urban, students, working youth, and every region of the province, other than the north, who didn't send a single person, was represented on this slate. It's better than we've had in a long time. When we got to the convention, there was about 1/3 of the membership of the people at the convention, 80 people, were with this slate already when they showed up. There was no membership check when we registered. This concerned a couple of us, but we went along, we got our credentials, everything was good. They only brought the membership lists, like the laptop, the little stick with the membership list up to date on the last day in the morning. And through incredibly poor time management, they were, I don't want to say they did it on purpose, but either through incompetence or maliciousness, they had the elections crammed into the shortest period of time before we got kicked out of the hall. So we had a choice at the very end of the day. They hadn't chosen to spend the morning and the afternoon checking memberships. We had a choice of not having all the executive, or any of the executive maybe, elected at that convention, and having to try to get everybody together again to do this, and having who knows who show up, maybe nobody. Or we could say everyone who has credentials, who has sworn that they are members, we're going to assume they are. Most of us know. We know each other, a lot of us. Some of us have been members of the NDP for 10 years, 5 years, whatever. Or you, if we can't go 20, 30. So we made that decision. It was an overwhelming majority of the people at this convention who were members in good standing, who voted, we're going to allow everyone's vote to count who has said they are a member. There was enough of a majority that even if you assume all of the new members, all the ones we don't know, were not members, we still had enough of a majority to override the Constitution if we wanted to. So it was valid, democratic decision. They also mentioned that the list was terribly inaccurate. I don't know if you've ever had a problem with your membership list in your local riding. I know that the candidate in my parents' riding wasn't on the list, and so the president, who had sent in her nomination form 2 or 3 months earlier, said, we're going to write you on there. But we weren't apparently allowed to do that as ONDP. So they had a re-election. They didn't even notify us about this. We had to find out through our riding presidents if they bothered to notify us. They had a re-election where it was coinciding with the provincial council. And the people that they brought, I spoke to a few of them. They had never been to or heard of ONDP before. And they didn't know any of the issues, they didn't know any of the people, but they did know who they were supposed to vote for. They set up a slate of people, most of whom have not been involved in the executive, haven't done anything since they stood for election, and blocked us. And other than 3 token seats, like Toronto representative, the old slate, despite having more experience, was blocked out completely. They had an excuse for this, saying that some of the members some of the people who were elected to this executive were not members, and they couldn't overlook that. As one of the few people who did actually check my membership in the morning, I noticed the laptop come in the room, and I said, hey, I think I might have a problem because I'm not sure I moved correctly, and checked it. I was there. 2 weeks later, I was one of the people whose membership had never been heard from. They had lost me having any record of my membership over the last 5 years, other than the fact that I was on a PAC. They was very appreciative of my continuous monthly donations. So they basically used whatever excuses they had to come up with to replace an elected Democratic executive for a very strong ONDP. We had people who every position except for the regional representatives had years of experience with activism. Our treasurer was already treasurer of 4 other things. we had an amazing executive, and they replaced it by using a stacked room at a council coinciding re-election with something that we haven't seen anything from them since. And keep in mind, of course, that ONDP is supposed to be independent of the executive. They used a rule that said that we had to follow. Oh, I don't even remember the rule. They misused a rule similar to the approval of candidates' forms in order to justify it, but they have no democratic or constitutional right to do what they did, and it just happened and it's done. There's nothing we can do about it now. Stop running again.
Thank you, Tristan. Deanna, you're welcome to speak to us. Diane.
So, we'll split the email name, that's something. First of all, I want to thank you very, very much for coming out to this important meeting. I know it's a weekend and you have lives and multiple identities, so thank you so much for coming out. I needed to say that. I also want to sort of identify myself, why I've come to this point, and I'm very happy to be here to speak about my experience in Etobicoke North. I'm an elementary school teacher, as John has indicated, and I'm a very vocal teacher unionist with the Elementary Teachers of Toronto, and our provincial organization is the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. I was also a former QP 4400 board member, and that is the support workers in the Toronto District School Board. I was on their executive board for 2 years, and that's where I got a lot of my equity training and activism and a strong sense of unionism and solidarity for all people. I was, as was indicated, the federal NDP Etobicoke North candidate, and I'm proud to say that with my small and dedicated, hard-working group, with a very limited budget, we got the highest percentage and voter turnout ever in Etobicoke North in the past 20 years, I should say in the past 20 years. And all this in what euphemistically is known as Ford country. Rob Ford and Doug Ford live in my riding, and it is a liberal stronghold, but there's a strong conservative element because of our mayor. So I'm an open lesbian. I come from poverty roots, and I'm an activist. So that is everything in antithesis against Rob Ford and a strong conservative ideology. So I just want to put that out there. I'm the best thing that could ever happen to conservatives or Rob Ford. That's what I think. So I just want to put that out there. Okay, so I did this today just to line it out so that you would understand what happened. And I'm sorry if I'm going to be long, but I'll be cut off by the chair, I'm sure. And I hope it's not too boring. But I haven't memorized it because I did it this morning and I was at another meeting. So please bear with me. So the background information, as I said, who I am and the voter turnout, we got 7,630 votes. The highest person behind that was the provincial controversial candidate who the NDP picked. He got 5,425 votes, and he would have been the next highest in 20 years. And really, he should have gotten a lot more because he came off my tail, he came off Jack Layton's tail, and it was within 3 months of the provincial election. So he should have at least matched me as a really poor showing. He got 2,000 plus votes less than me, and that's partly because of what I'm going to account for right now. So since May, our new writing association federally has been very active. We were gung-ho, we were excited about how we did federally, and we got a lot of new members signed up within 2 months. We got 33 members signed up within 2 months. We actively went out in the community, talked their issues, listened to them. We got 15 youth signed up. And the Writing Association was stagnant since the previous candidate, my predecessor, his name was Ali Nakfi. Nothing was done from 2008 on for our Writing Association. Nothing was done. We got it going. We got a full executive elected. We were getting members signed up. We're going into June now. June, I submitted my nomination papers to the ONDP, and several weeks had gone by, and I was hearing nothing, and I thought, well, I should have a response by now. It should be pretty simple because I was the federal candidate. It wasn't an issue. As an honest person and a person who has nothing to hide from anyone, and I stand on my ethics and my experience, I disclosed on my nomination papers that I was thinking of pursuing legal action against my federation. Well, I finally called the Darlene Lawson, the Ontario Secretary, and asked her, it's been about 2 weeks, I haven't heard a thing, what's going on with my candidacy, my nomination papers. She would not answer. I emailed her several times, would not respond, called her, ramped it up a bit. talked to my writing association president, who called as well, who emailed as well, no response. Then a few days after this ongoing questioning of, we want a full answer, what's going on, I get a call from a temporary staff, a very low-level temporary staff, just hired for the provincial elections, in fact. And she says to me, very cryptically, and in about a 40-second conversation over the phone, oh, well, the selection committee feels that your issue would detract from the leader's message. I said, I'm not accepting that. You are not the person to be giving this. This is verbal. This is not a full explanation. I have a right to a full explanation and to appeal it in front of the provincial council if I feel that is inappropriate or that it is not justified. And I'd like you to name who those selection committee members are. Was reticent to tell me who those people were. So, of course, I pursued my writing association president, in tandem, always pursuing. We finally got a response from Darlene Lawson, the provincial secretary, agreeing to meet with us. We prepared a full presentation. I talked about the equity aspect, how I did federally. I talked about all the growth we were creating in Etobicoke North, how gung-ho we were, how well we did with the minimum budget, why it's good for the NDP, etc., quoting the Constitution, where they were clearly in violation. You're entitled to, as any member, regardless of whether you're a candidate or not. You're a member of the NDP. You disagree with something, you question something, you have a right to appeal that as a duly paying and a paid-up member. So quoted parts of our actual article, and they ignored it. She finally agreed to meet with my writing association president and myself. We made about a half-an-hour presentation, very impassioned, very thorough, quoting the Constitution, again, using all things that would show that, you're crazy not to allow her to at least run again. Darlene was very, very positive. Her body action was very, very, what's the word? Receptive, yes. And she made some very, very positive comments. She did a mock interview with me on the spot where she said, okay, Miss Andrews, we hear that you're suing your teacher federation. How do you respond? As if it was media interviewing me on the spot. And I just basically said, call me right into it. I just picked her up on her little interview. And I said, you know what, I'm here for the purpose of representing Etobicoke North residents and their issues and what the NDP stands for, and that's why I'm here. So let's stay on topic here, the reason why you're interviewing me. And she was fine with that. She, on the just off the cuff, she was fine with that. She made some positive comments, she smiled. I gave her a letter from the work I do in my federation, where a teacher member was very, very happy with my representation, where he called me a grizzly bear for representing him well in a school. And she laughed at that. She thought that was cute. So she got up and she went out to photocopy some documents. I was there with my writing association president, and she had a witness there. I guess you can call it a witness there for her to, verify what was being said back and forth. And she went out to photocopy, and as she was going out, she kind of turned to me out the door, and she kind of waved her finger at me and said, like as if a mother was speaking to her daughter, sort of chastising lightly. Now, if I hear any bad news about you, Diana, you're going to have to speak to me. We took that, my writing association president and myself, we took that as a positive, we're going to get it, We convinced her. We left feeling good, positive, talking. She said give us a day or so. A day or so went by. I got a phone call in the morning from Darlene Lawson, the first time she's spoken to me about this, ever. Basically, praising the presentation, how it was an excellent presentation, very thorough, and then basically not saying it's denied, not saying my nomination was disproved, or disapproved, I'm not sure which word it is, but basically saying, well, my sister in the background has helped me out here. Anyway, basically, nebulously saying the decision stands, or the original piece, I won't have it verbatim, but original communication you got from that temporary staff person stands. And I said, well, I understand from the Constitution that there is an appeal process. I said, I want this in writing, and I want specifics, detailed specifics about why my nomination was denied, because that's what I'm entitled to as a member, and it's right in the Constitution. And basically, we ended the conversation very friendly note, very respectful, and that was it. Well, my writing associate and myself carried forward, knowing that we did not get an official response, that nothing was in writing, that nothing was detailed, not because you're attempting to sue your federation, nothing was detailed. So we carried on. Me being nominated, I resubmitted my nomination papers, got the notice that you have before you, as Barry calls it, Exhibit A, if you want to pick that nomination notice. That's exactly what every member was sending to me before. Now, you tell me, you people are engaged, politically aware, connected people, activists. Nomination meeting, does that say acclamation meeting? Does that say one-person nomination meeting? No. Nomination meeting, as we all know, you go to a meeting, people who are engaged in that or invested in that or members, they select who they will choose, or they nominate even people to stand. It could be the whole room, if time permitted. I'm sure it could be. So that's the first error, and they knew they were doing this because they're dealing with a highly racialized riding, a lot of poverty, a lot of immigrants. Over 50% are immigrants, or in and around that. So they knew what they were dealing with. So they're confusing people with the notice they're sending to new members and old members. Then it talks about the meeting to select our candidate, you've got a sheet there, for the next provincial election. Well, if you're going to select a candidate, obviously there has to be more than one person. Otherwise you just pick, you acclaim, you appoint. So even that term, that verb selection, tells you there is to be more than one. You can't use select, there's nothing to select or choose between. So that was very, very, very erroneous and intended on my writing where they're very vulnerable. They don't understand, for the most part, the democratic process, the nomination process. A lot of them, as I said, we signed up. They're brand new members are going to the first meeting to support me, and they're getting this, and they're getting confused. So here's what happened at the meeting. The first part was very, very quick and very, very obvious. Scott Piatkowski, who's one of the vice presidents of Ontario NDP, chaired the meeting. Just as John, he's in front of a pulpit, or dais, I'm not sure which you call it. And he welcomed everybody for coming out and stuff like that. And he said, the purpose of the meeting, this is to nominate, to select the candidate for the Ontario NDP party in the provincial elections. And so right after he said that and welcomed everybody, and there were actually more than 70 people there because people came in late, and there were people lined across the back, so there probably were about 100. They were just standing up as the meeting went on. The next thing he said to the members and invited guests was, any nominations from the floor? So my first guy, his name is Glenn Wood, who is close to Barry's, some of these gentlemen, about 20-year member of NDP in Etobicoke North, helped out Ed Phillip way back when in the 80s, stands up and nominates me. He got a call from the chair for nominations. We're not accepting that nomination. Then he explained to the group, the only nomination we're expecting is the only candidate, and he mentioned Vren Sharma. Okay, people started getting up, questioning that. What's going on here? This is supposed to be nominated. Anyway, people got up, question. He could not respond. He kept saying, we're moving on with the acclamation. How did this nomination meeting all of a sudden become an acclamation meeting? Why come out if you're going to be acclaimed? Just tell us all who the acclaimed person is in a notice. Anyway, so people started complaining and questioning him. He couldn't handle it. He did not know parliamentary procedures at all. He was stumbling. And then I got up after a bit, and I see how it was going in, and a little bit of, I got up and I challenged him with Robert's Rules of Order, but I couldn't find the article where it says the body could overturn any chair's decision if they find fault with it. They could overturn that. I couldn't find it because I was so nervous, but I did speak out, and if any of you are not aware of, you've heard of it, it is online on the Extra magazine. It's quite public, and there's bits and pieces of it, Barry's article in York Region online. So it's certainly extra.ca, August 17th, nomination meeting. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana. And now